And we are back. Come in, Jimmy boys and Jimmy girls, gather round for yet another installment of the Jimmy Boy Hour with your host, Omarcomin. That's me. We got us another 4,500 point game on the Ontario 9th Age competitive ladder, this time against a Demon Legion's opponent in a player named Illonius. This is my first time playing against him. But he has spectated on a handful of my games and has seen this list in action a handful of times. So it's an exciting game. A little bit of friendly banter went on early on prior to the start of this game. So it was neither one of us really wanted to lose, but I think a good time was had by all. And another really good games. Just to run down his list, my list, of course, has not changed. But just from left to right, so you know what's what when I describe things. In the west, the left-hand side of the board, we have a threshing engine, 10 succubi, 15 myrmidons, 5 wolves, another threshing engine, another 10 succubi, 15 myrmidons, his big block of brazen beasts with a harbinger in there, the 6 Veil Serpents, and then way in the east, trying to avoid cannon fire, is his Scourge of Vandera. So pretty heavy list. I mean, Demon Legions tend to want to fight, lots of attacks, lots of armor piercing, no armor, which is nice. And yeah, I mean, the scariest thing here, I think, was misdeployed a little bit in his Brazen Beasts, who are tucked in behind that impassable terrain. I think he thought he would have a more balanced approach. Actually, no. What happened was we traded deployments. So I think he wanted them in the center in case I deployed all in the eastern flank. So once he deployed behind that rock, I pretty much dropped my entire army in the west. So you see here, I've sort of learned my lesson in that I haven't deployed my rangers off on their own, just waiting to die. But by deploying rangers in my main battle line, I now have to contend with some pretty wide and immobile units in my battle line. So that creates a little bit of a movement dilemma, as you'll see in turn 1. But the objective here was King of the Hill, so I named the field as my scoring, which you see the unit of 12 rangers sitting in, and he named the set of ruins directly across from the field. So some interesting choices. Basically means most, if not all, of the fighting in this game is going to occur in that western block, and I think that's sort of most of the background we need here. Yeah. So at the end of Dorvanhold's turn 1, I probably was a little bit more passive than maybe I should have been, particularly on my easternmost column. I think I could have been a bit more aggressive. Basically, I want the fight to come to me, more so than I want to bring the fight to him in this case, because if I bring the fight to him, I'm facing a whole lot of combo charges. But if I use sacrifice a handful of warrior units to bring him forward, that should give me more favorable flank charges and things like that. So a little bit of I guess a mistake in terms of strategy, but I don't know. I think my concern is just that those chariots can fly pretty far. Not fly, but move pretty far. And all of his units are movement 5, so they've pretty threatening charge ranges. I guess the Hounds have even more than that, but slight misplay on my part as well in the eastern column. The trailing unit of Kingsguard is too close to the leading unit of warriors, and as a result, if he actually does do this, if he moves up his Veil Serpents aggressively, in the east, I would not be able to declare a charge on them because they would not be able to wheel past the leading unit of warriors. So bit of an issue there, and that I don't think it turns out to be a problem, but it's not great. So yeah, not a hugely eventful turn, although in Magic I did get Gleaming and Resilience off on 2 units. I think he let me have one of those 2 and the other I snuck in. And then in shooting, I don't think I did much of anything with my Rangers. It looks like I got 1 wound on the westernmost threshing engine, but then one of my cannons. And there was a bit of banter before the game began about the placement of that Scourge of Vandera, given that it has hard target but is gigantic. I was hitting it on 5-up, and there was some debate about whether or not it was worthwhile to give me that first shot in order to get to safety behind the hill. And what ended up happening is I hit him on 5-up, I wounded on 6-up, and then I caused D3 wounds plus 2 on a 5-up. So I ended up doing a total of 5 wounds onto the Scourge of Vandera, leaving it with 2 remaining. So any subsequent cannon shot would kill it outright, whether I wound, without even a D3, because it would only have 2 wounds remaining. So basically killing that unit without gaining the points for it. So I think my opponent was a little bit salty about that, but that was part of the reason I chose the top, was that I would have he pretty much would have nowhere to hide if I had the first turn. So that worked out in my favor for once. So anyone who tells you cannons aren't worth taking needs to shut the fuck up. Turn 2 demons. That's turn 1 demons, rather. And it looks like I forgot to take a screenshot at the very end of his turn, so there's a little bit of my turn mixed in here. So turn 1 demons, he moves up towards my battle line pretty aggressively, so he's right up in my face now. Or no, not that aggressively actually. He just moves up to be in line with those ruins across his line. His Scourge takes shelter as quickly as it possibly can behind that hill, and he starts moving up in the eastern flank with his Veil Serpents. Magic, he got the attribute... Oh, I know what he did. He cast... I'm going to have to look it up. It is... shit. Well, this does not make for very good radio. He cast the spell that causes my machines not to shoot. I can't remember the name of it. Smite. Oh, Twisted Effigy. So he cast Twisted Effigy on the center cannon, the one behind the forest there, so that could not shoot, and then he got the attribute off on the leading unit of warriors that reduces their movement range, and I believe causes them to lose some discipline. Other than that, in Magic, he didn't do too much, so his Scourge is about a mile out of the game now and can't do much of anything. So he basically, most of his spells are tied up on that unit and will remain out of range for most of the game to avoid cannon fire. Shooting, he has none, so we move to Dwarven Hold's turn 2. I think this is end of movement. I don't think I shot yet, so I'm going to just advance to the next slide here. No, I didn't take another picture. So what we do end up with is this is a combined. So this also has most of Dwarves turn 2 in it. So as you can see, I move up to try to redirect and chaff him up a little bit with my warrior units. My main concerns at this point are really the Myrmidons and dealing with those quickly. So I'm trying to, in the east, redirect those Myrmidons to either collide with the Impassable or end up stuck in with another unit of warriors. And then in the west, I have that unit of warriors positioned, and this might have been a misplay. I positioned them in such a way that they couldn't overrun into the Kingsguard unit. I didn't want to double overrun into that Kingsguard unit. I think that would have been a lot for one unit of Kingsguard to deal with. So the overrun I gave them sent them off the board. And that turned out to be a bit of a mistake. It would have been far better if I had just overrun them directly into the Kingsguard. The Rangers could have offered a supporting charge, and that I think would have been a much better play. Yeah, so that's sort of where it ends up. Turn 2. It looks like I got Gleaming in on the center unit of warriors, and I got Revocation off on the cannon, allowing it to shoot again. I believe that it missed. The other cannon hit the Brazen Beasts, but he warded the shot. Or actually, no, in this round I rolled a 1 to wound, so no wounds went through on the Brazen Beasts, and the other cannon missed. The Rangers in the center, looks like they did 3 wounds onto that unit of Succubi, and then the 10 miners that appeared in behind on the ambush appeared behind the Myrmidons, and combined with the 12 Rangers, it looks like they did 5 wounds onto those Myrmidons, so they've effectively lost the benefit of their fight in extra ranks there, which is going to be a good thing when it comes to dealing with that unit later on. And now I think we'll move to his turn 2. So in Demon's turn 2, charges from left to right were declared. The Threshing Engine and the Succubi attempted or charged the warriors in the west, who you no longer see in this image, with good reason. And you'll see the Succubi and the Chariot end this turn off the board, as I alluded to previously. The Myrmidons attempted a long charge on the Rangers, who shot them up and did another 3 wounds on their stand and shoot. In the center, things got a little bit cocked up here. So the Wolves charged the warrior unit that was ahead of them, and then I believe he tried to charge with his Succubi as well and his Chariot. He tried to charge all 3 into that warrior unit that was directly in front of the Wolves, believing I could cause one of those 3 to fail. I'm not sure how this worked exactly, but he declared all 3 charging that unit. I think the Wolves was the last one, had to have been. So he declared charge with his Succubi, declared charge with his Chariot. I held twice. Then the Wolves declared their charge, at which point I declared a flee. So those warriors end up the other side of that Ranger unit. He attempted to redirect at the nearest unit of warriors in the west by the Impassable, and I believe he redirected with both, and I fled with that nearest unit of warriors. So I still had a second unit of warriors on that eastern column that were still there. So that closest unit of warriors fled, ended up popping out through their buddies just ahead of them. And both the Chariot and the Succubi failed charge. He did not declare a redirect on the Wolves, so they also failed charge. And the Myrmidons declared on that trailing unit of warriors, which they got into. So that unit of war, the second line of warrior chaff on that eastern column. So they got in there. And that's pretty much the size of it. In his magic phase, it doesn't look like he got anything this turn. But now that unit of Myrmidons is sort of sitting there. They did run down both units of warriors in the in their pursue movement. So both units were fleeing, and they rolled high enough to have caught both. So both popped. No panics subsequently after that, but they ended up a little bit deeper into my line than anticipated. So have some hard decisions to make in my turn, but I think we did okay. Dwarven holds turn 3, and things start to get exciting here. So a whole lot of charges were declared. From left to right, the warriors that were just in front of the ruins charged the threshing engine that was behind those succubi and made it in. I think it was a 6 or a 5 they needed, and they got it. The center unit of Kingsguard and the Rangers both declared charge against the Wolves, and both made it in. The reason I charged that center unit of Kingsguard into the Wolves was to allow my command unit, the General and BSB's unit, to execute a flank charge on those Myrmidons. So they came into the flank along with the unit of Kingsguard in the east. Yeah, I think that was an interesting move, maybe not the brightest. I think where I actually went wrong was a little later in this turn. So in Magic, it looks like I got Resilience off on the Kingsguard who were fighting in the front of those Myrmidons. So as a result, they were only able to do, it looks like 3 wounds onto the Kingsguard. So that's a nice big bonus there. I probably would have lost far, far more had they not had Resilience. And I got Revocation in on those Brazen Beasts. In shooting, I think both cannons missed on the Brazen Beast, so that's not ideal. And the unit of 12 Rangers, it looks like, had nothing to shoot at in the west, so not ideal again. In combat, again, only 3 Kingsguard died and popped that entire unit of Myrmidons with the flank, the big flank, the 3 ranks, and whatever other damage we did in combat. They just died outright. The Wolves, I think there was 1 body remaining on the Wolves after that charge. And I think this is where I really made a bad mistake. So I elected to overrun with the Rangers into the Succubi, thinking that basically I thought he wouldn't be able to complete the charge onto them with his Brazen Beasts. I also didn't want the beasts charging directly into that warrior, or into the Rangers, and then being into the Kingsguard unit on an overrun. That would not have been ideal. So I'm not sure if it would have been any better if I had reformed them to either face the Brazen Beast. At least then I would have got a stand and shoot, I guess. I think a more European player might have reformed them into some sort of Congo line so that it wouldn't be all that easy to for the Brazen Beast to charge in the subsequent round. Anyway, I'm not sure what I could have done differently there. Perhaps not charge the Rangers at all and use them instead as a chaff piece to take that first Brazen Beast charge. I needed to slow them down somehow, but this was not the way. Instead, what ends up happening is those Brazen Beasts can make it into that Succubi combat for free and basically get 2 units for the price of 1. So not a great play there. My command unit is now in the center of the battle with those Veil Serpents in their flank, so not ideal there either. I couldn't figure out a way to reform my Kingsguard so that they would protect that flank. I may not have been possible, so I'm not too sure. The warrior unit did rally, and this is what we're left with at the end of Dorvanhold's turn 3. And this is where things start to unravel a little bit. So in his turn, he declares a charge with the Brazen Beasts onto my command unit. And I hold for that charge, fully expecting the Veil Serpents to come into my flank. So the Veil Serpents charge the flank of the general's unit, and I declare a flee reaction, sending my unit of spears and BSB in general all the way across the map, pretty much from the center to the very board edge. And they managed to fit just barely into that slot in front of the Kingsguard unit without touching the board edge. So they managed to survive, but that has other implications, unfortunately. So his Brazen Beasts redirect their charge onto, and I'm missing a slide here, I apologize. This is actually the end of a Dorvanhold's turn as well as the end of Demon Legion's turn 2. So the Brazen Beasts charge into that Ranger and Warrior combat with those Succubi. They get into the flank on what I thought was going to be an impossible charge, but after some back and forth, we decided it was going to be possible. So they end up in the flank there, basically kill the Rangers to a man, and then the Succubi run down the unit of warriors that was in the rear subsequently. The Veils, after the general's unit fled, redirected onto my unit of Kingsguard that had resilience on them, obviously making it in. And then I believe he cast Whispers of the Veil on that unit, so their resilience is reduced by 1. So they actually remain resilience 4. I was still feeling pretty good about that combat, and I thought I would win it in a grind. But this is after 2 rounds of combat. You see that I've only managed to do, it looks like 5 wounds to him. Meanwhile, he's done quite a few more. It looks like 6 just in this previous turn, but there was only 3 units or 3 models missing out of there, so that was a 12 strong unit of Kingsguard when they took the charge. And then I had a full round of magic and everything else to try to help them out, and I suppose failed. What else happens here? I misplayed rather badly actually here, and I just want to take a second to explain that. So I didn't really understand how the Wizard's Enclave or whatever works, the unit that can cast spells like a wizard. I went into this game thinking I needed to get rid of Flaming Swords, and with the Scourge of Vandera pretty much out of action, I needed to move off of that strategy for my Rune of Devouring, and instead I basically let these Veil Serpents continue to cast their full complement of spells throughout the entire game. I had ample opportunity to get rid of Whispers of the Veil, which really would have maybe not helped me in this combat or in this turn, but in subsequent turns he still had 3 spells on these things that he got off fairly regularly and fairly aggressively. He was 5-dicing them most of the time, 4 or 5-dicing them. So I didn't really clue into how to deal with that until a little later in the game when I started allocating attacks against the champion. I actually thought the way it worked was you had to kill the entire unit or they could continue casting. So in this combat, if I had my druthers, I would have just been sending as many attacks as possible into the champion to get rid of their casting ability, and then you basically would have had no buffs for the remainder of the game. In their first round of combat, I think I lost by maybe 1 or 2, but I was steadfast with a second rank. But then in the subsequent rounds, he broke my steadfast, and I think I managed to stick on a 5 or something like that. So not bad, although with just the anvil able to throw buffs on that Kingsguard unit, I wasn't able to do anything to counteract Whispers of the Veil. I think Gleaming would have been a big help there if those... and in fact, Resilience would have been huge too, or Revocation. Any one of the 3 would have helped, because at least then I wouldn't be Resilience 3. I think in this turn I ended up being Resilience 3, which is why I lost so badly. In the center, I don't think this is any surprise. The Brazen Beast destroyed those Rangers, and the Warriors were run down, and then they overran into my waiting unit of Kingsguard. Probably an error here. So rather than let that initial unit of Kingsguard get sacked, I charged in with a second unit of Kingsguard, thinking I might be able to put a nice big dent in that unit and reduce their basically devastating and impact charge capabilities. As a result, I gave him basically a free overrun with... No, that's not right. Yeah, that is what happened. Basically, with those Kingsguard hanging off the flank, the Veil Serpents are able to make it in a subsequent turn, and I believe I failed a reform test, or else I would have reformed them so that he couldn't charge the front of the Kingsguard with those Veil Serpents. Yeah, I mean, charging into a unit with devastating charge, probably with the same devastating charge of those Brazen Beasts, probably wasn't very smart. I probably should have just left that one unit of Kingsguard die. They had a pretty long overrun to get to the Rangers, so I think the best play would have been to, I don't know, hold off and try to set something else up. Really, I think the best unit to take that charge is my General's unit, and hope for a steadfast and then a counter charge into the flanks. I think that's probably the only way I could have dealt with those Brazen Beasts in this game, but as a result, they're just going to run a train from here. I think that's all there is to say. His units of Succubi and the Threshing Machine came back on the board in this turn. I don't know if anyone else is aware of this, but when something runs off the board, if there is a unit in the position where they would return to the board, they come back on the board in the nearest free spot. So the Threshing Machine came in south of the command unit, and the Succubi came in north of the Kingsguard, and I reformed to face them with the Kingsguard, and I left the other one facing the flank of the General's unit because they had the Miners able to offer a rear charge. This is just a picture of the end of that Dorvanhold's turn 4. So you see he killed that unit of Kingsguard outright. The Kingsguard failed to reform. Those Veil Serpents are now breathing down their neck after, I guess, winning that combat. I believe there's 2 Kingsguard unit that fled from those Veil Serpents. So they failed to run them down, it looks like, and missed by 1 inch. So those Kingsguard are directly in front of them, and it's his turn. So he will have a charge onto those 2 remaining Kingsguard. And in combat, the Miners destroyed the Chariot and pivot to start heading for the objective. At this point, I'm fairly confident I can still win on objectives, but there's still a very scary unit to deal with. This is Dorvanhold's turn 5. Sort of catch a break here a little bit. I'll run it down. Did I charge them? What the fuck? No. Okay. So in his turn, the Kingsguard broke from that combat with 5 models remaining. He attempted to overrun with both, and I'm really not sure if this was just resolved correctly. So didn't catch the unit with either of his, but yeah, this is really confusing. So both the Brazen Beasts and the Veil Serpents were in combat with the Kingsguard unit. Kingsguard unit fled, I think, 8 or 9, and he rolled just under with both the Brazen Beasts and the Veil Serpents. So the Veil Serpents somehow, and this is a bit of an argument, made it into combat with those warriors, which I'm not sure is correct. If you fail to run down the Kingsguard, I believe you just, I don't know. It seemed really weird that they would be able to fail their pursuit distance and then still make it into combat with another unit. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to resolve that. If someone could lend some clarity to that, that would be appreciated. But anyway, the Veils ended up in those warriors, and the Kingsguard are now in between the Brazen Beasts and the Rangers, and they rallied at the top of my turn. Oh fuck, this is all out of sequence. He charged me also in his turn, so his Succubus charged my Kingsguard in the west, and there's 3 Succubus left, and it looks like he killed 3 Kingsguard, and then that overrun action happened. His Scourge is still chilling, so really this is what's left on the board. In Magic, it looks like I got Gleaming off on those warriors, and Revocation on the Rangers, and there was a reason for this. So he had cast that spell that causes you not to be able to use your shooting attacks. So I got Gleaming in on the warriors. I baited out his dice with Resolve and all that other stuff for Resilience, and then I cast the Revocation spell there. Then between the 2 cannons and those 12 Rangers, I managed to do quite a few wounds onto the Brazen Beasts. You know, there's 2 models left, one with only 2 HP left, and feeling pretty good about that. One of them, of course, is still the Harbinger, so not much in my list remaining can really deal with that. Yeah. So the Veils kill that, or win combat with that unit of warriors and successfully overrun into the Kingsguard. I'm not sure. My screenshots are all out of sequence here. I think I'm just taking pictures now for no reason. It looks like the Kingsguard won their combat and turned to face the Brazen Beasts, probably figuring that that unit of Kingsguard is going to get killed, and then there will be another overrun as a consequence. Yeah, not much else happening here. And this is just the... Ooh, no, it's not the end of the game. So as expected, the Kingsguard unit folds. The Rangers take up Brazen Beast charge. He runs down the fleeing unit of warriors with his overrun from the Veil Serpents. And that's... yeah, that's kind of going to be it. And then I believe I have one more turn and he has one more turn, so yeah. So in my turn, I charged the Veil Serpents with my remaining unit of Kingsguard, and I could just see the rear of the Brazen Beasts, so I charged them with my command unit. My miners move into the objective, he runs away. In combat, obviously the Kingsguard destroy the Veil Serpents, and it looks as though the Brazen Beasts pretty much, I think I killed both in combat, or no, I only did 1 wound, so they fail, and the Rangers, I believe, will flee. And I think out of the kindness of my heart, or just because I wanted the game to be over, I let him have the points for them, even though I don't think they ran off the board. And this is how the game ends. So I have both objectives. The Rangers are gone, and he still has basically his BSB, his Harbinger, and his Scourge of Vandera, who spent the entire game hiding, and then that small unit of Succubi that are just kind of doing nothing. So basically, what started out really strongly for me ended up folding like a wet paper bag under the pressure of those Brazen Beasts. They're just, I mean, I guess if I didn't have to take the flank charge from the Veil Serpents, I'm fairly confident my Spear Bus would have remained steadfast, and I would have been able to get that Brazen Beast unit for maybe a couple more wounds onto my spears. I would have been in the flank of them with a unit of Kingsguard, which should have been sufficient without the benefit of their devastating charge to handle at least the majority of that Brazen Beast unit. Just a couple misplays I think early cost me badly, and I think there was an alternate way to resolve that big charge turn on my end. I think I maybe perhaps just declared a few too many charges. I probably could have gotten away with fewer, although I really did feel I needed a flank threat in on those Myrmidons in order to survive that turn, but obviously exposed my general and BSB. I think the only thing that can really withstand the Brazen Beasts is a big steadfast unit, and I only really have the one in this army, so I think I needed to play around that. Basically his victory condition was what I gave him, which was the ability to run through the flanks of my army with his most powerful unit. This game ends up in a 15-5 for me, so I still do win, but I feel like I could have played better. I could have had a better result. I just let something slip away. So if you saw it, or you know what I could have done differently, and I know it's difficult to see from the end of turns and not the beginning of turns. Maybe I might start taking 2 screenshots per turn. Yeah, it was an interesting game. I mean, demons are really tough in combat, and I have a list that wants to fight. I think I failed to set up appropriate flank and redirect for him. So in that narrow space between that impassable and the board edge, it was kind of hard to do that, especially given how long his charge ranges are. It was hard to make that work in my favor, but I'm happy with the result, but I'm not exceedingly happy with how I played. I think I could have done better. But anyway, it was a good game. I think the opponent was not bad. I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I just think I think he could have done some things a little bit differently too to bring the pain to me a little bit more. But he will admit he's rusty as well. I think he definitely has some tools in here that I would have had a harder time dealing with had he deployed them a little bit differently. But all in all, one we can be more or less happy with. So that's it for now. Stay Jimmy, boys and girls, and we will catch you next time.